Lacan hits the ground running in Seminar 19, and right back to Aristotle, of all people. Why? Because he wants to show that the formulas of sexuation that he began to develop in his previous seminar, Seminar 18, on a discourse that might not be a semblance, that these formulas are founded on a certain mathematical logic, as he calls it, extending from antiquity, in which letters and numbers, when italicized, overlined, not underlined, but overlined, flipped backwards, turned upside down, you get the idea, washed up in all sorts of contorted shapes. These letters and numbers, when they wash up, can be used to account for the impossible, which is to say, the real. This is what's up with Lacan's mathemes, as he now starts to call them. And one real impossibility in particular, the sexual relation. On this point, our boy is adamant, but also elusive, I find, at the start of Seminar 19. He says, even though there is no such thing as sexual relation, it nevertheless regulates everything that is involved in our experience to such an extent that this non-existence of the sexual rapport constitutes the basic question of human togetherness. Not just sexed social life. The claim is starker than that. It's a basic question of human togetherness. Which is why I'm starting our series on Seminar 19 here, on the question of a sexual relation which is no such thing. A question which is also, apparently, a difficult one for Lacanians to answer. Notice how Lacan broaches this topic at the bottom of page 4 in the standard English translation of Seminar 19. This fact of saying, which I'm taking up from last year's seminar, is expressed, as is any fact of saying, in a complete proposition. There is no such thing as sexual relation. What this year's title proposes is that there's no ambiguity about this. Move outside it, and what you will say will only be worse. Here he's toying with the title of Seminar 19, which is or worse, and he's referring back to Seminar 18 and arriving at this proposition, there is no such thing as sexual relation. Notice where he goes from here. There is no such thing as sexual relation. This proposition is proposed, and therefore as a truth. I've already said, however, the truth can only come mid-say. So what I'm saying is that all in all, what the other half says is worse. How much simpler things would be if there were no worse. At this point, there is no such thing as a sexual relation. It's still just a proposition. That's one of the important parts to take away from this opening passage at the start of Seminar 19. It's still just a proposition. But it's not just any proposition, as Lacan clarifies. It's a truth proposition, by which I mean it's a proposition that has a certain truth value. This also is something that he establishes in Seminar 18 and in our previous series that we worked pretty hard with, to establish a truth valuational logic, by which any given proposition or statement can be tested to the extent that it approximates or speaks a truth, whether or not it's true. So the question here is the proposition, there's no such thing as a sexual relation, high or low in its truth value? If it's high, if it has a high truth value, like the proposition 2 plus 2 equals 4 in standard vanilla mathematics, we know that that has a very high truth value. If this proposition about there being no such thing as a sexual relation has a high truth value, it will cleave close to the truth of psychoanalysis. If, however, it has a low truth value, like the proposition in vanilla math of 2 plus 2 equals 5, then this proposition about there being no such thing as a sexual relation will not cleave close to the truth of psychoanalysis. So that's what he's up to here in part, by connecting propositional logic to truth value. Now, we don't need to go too far into this. In many ways, we've crossed that bridge before. What I want to ask is the nature of the truth of psychoanalysis. What is this truth that the proposition there's no such thing as a sexual relation approximates? The truth of psychoanalysis, as you've heard me say in previous series, and as I'll never tire of saying, at least at this point, is weakness. The truth of psychoanalysis is incapacity. The truth of psychoanalysis is impotentiality. Remember, what Lacan is also up to here at the start of Seminar 19 is a return to Aristotle's theory of modal logic, necessary, contingent, actual, possible, and with them impossible, the potential and the impotential. Here, though, that detumescence, that impotence also rings true for Lacan's thought. The truth of psychoanalysis, weakness, incapacity, impotentiality, all of which is summed up in a single word, castration. The truth of analytic theory and technique is castration. And this is precisely what any true proposition in and about analytic experience says. There's more to this than can be said. I'm powerless to go further, to know more, to say the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. You see, that's why we need God's help, because the whole truth can't be said. That's the dilemma of the truth. For Lacan, it always splits into the part of truth that can be said and the part of truth that cannot be said. And the part of truth that can be said, you've heard me say, always says the same thing. There's this other part to me, this other part that can't be said. I can't say much more about it except that it's out there. That's what a true statement always says. Whether as symptom or as matheme, it says there is more to this than I can say. I am powerless, incapable, and impotent to go further in its direction. So let me be clear. Statements of truth for Lacan are always at root statements of limitation, constraint, incapacity, powerlessness, which is a theme that comes up at the start of 19 and also was a theme that figured prominently in his simultaneous across-town lecture on the psychoanalyst knowledge, which we did a little mini-series on. You can check it out. These are all statements of truth that are fundamentally statements of castration. The part of truth, any truth, that can be said, always says just that, in other words. There's another side to all of this that can't be said. I really want to emphasize this because it shows that a true statement for Lacan is one that is always on the edge of some kind of a hole, an edge in knowledge where truth opens up. And to speak at that edge is to engage in statements of impotentiality. I'm at this edge, I can't go any further with this. There's something out there that is nothing. Beyond this point, I can't reach it. This is why Lacan also quips in these years about truth being in love with itself. And I don't mean love in the profound Lacanian sense. I mean love in the narrow, naive sense. Truth is in love with itself, says Lacan, because it can't stop talking about itself. Truth never shuts up about itself. Do you see how I'm getting at that? What Lacan means is that true statements always say there's more to be said. They always say, I am a partial statement of truth. There's this other side that I really can't speak about. And in this sense, truth is always talking about itself, about its other half. And you don't need examples really to make sense of this beyond a simple love letter, a simple postcard, any profession of love. And here I am at the end of January 2024 recording this with Valentine's Day right around the corner. And here's what those love letters say. Here's what those cards say. Words fail as I try and describe my love for you. And so we resort to metaphor, and so we resort to poetry. But what we're always saying again and again is, my love far exceeds anything that I could write in this paltry letter. That's a statement of truth in the field of love. And what it says is, there is way more to my love for you than what I could possibly pronounce in a letter of this sort, in a card, in a postcard. I wish I could tell you how much. Words fail. I can't quite find the words for this. There is no stronger testament to one's love of another in the more profound sense than this statement of incapacity, this statement of weakness. I am powerless to go further in pronouncing my love for you. You see, this for Lacan is a true statement because it speaks castration. So how does all of this then relate to the sexual relation, which is no such thing? Well, the sexual relation doesn't exist, and it cannot be spoken or written into existence. But here's the thing. This statement, namely the statement, the sexual relation doesn't exist, and it cannot be written into existence or spoken into existence, this statement about its impossibility does exist. It can be said, it can be written, and thus forced into existence. The sexual relation doesn't exist, it's impossible. But the statement, the sexual relation doesn't exist, it's impossible, does exist. We can work with the statement, even if we do not have a referent for it. Which is why, I believe, there's no such thing as a sexual relation constitutes a true statement, a proposition that Lacan here categorizes as a truth, because it's ultimately a statement of the impossible. And when I say the impossible, I mean the real. Let's be categorical, right out of the gates. We're not fucking around. Statements of truth are statements of impossibility, and the latter are always pronouncements of the real.